I have moved over into the other scene in your file, the ball with tail anim scene. And in this, you'll see that I've put together a little obstacle course for the ball with the tail. And when you're working on your own, if you would prefer to make changes to the obstacle course, go right ahead. I was thinking kind of like dog show jumps and a little twisty thing and some blocks for it to bounce on. I would prefer that if you do make changes, you stick to these obstacles and just reposition them. If you want to add more, you can. Try not to take anything away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through having the ball move through the scene. And I'm going to do this in 2, maybe 3 steps. The first thing I'm going to do is just block out the motion. And for this, I'm going to be animating the placement control, which you will remember has its pivot point at the origin. Having the pivot point at the origin is going to make it much easier for me to have the ball jump around and consistently hit the ground. When I start my animation, I am going to start by just taking the ball and positioning it over here at the first jump. And in my eye, the ball's going to go over these 3 jumps, through this little tunnel, and then up and over these series of blocks. It'll finish about here, and you'll see that I've got 200 keyframes available to me. I think that's going to be fine. I may not need them all, but it's better to have more than not enough. As I fine-tune this animation, I will be zooming in on the graph editor and the time slider, but for the moment I'm just going to leave them all. The other thing that I'm going to do is after I set my initial keyframe, and at this point I know I'm not going to be changing the ball scale, I am going to be translating and rotating, so I'm going to take all of these channels and key selected. You know from previous experiences with animation that you never want to have any sort of extra keyframe data. But for the moment, I'm not really sure what channels I'm going to need. So I'm going to give myself a few little extra pieces, and we'll see what I can do. Maybe I'll move this back a little bit, and then in a few frames, maybe by frame 12, we'll just have it move up to the first jump. Now, in order to save time when I'm blocking out animation, sometimes I will use these step tangents. And what step tangents do is, again, they change state. So the ball will be here, then it'll pop over to there. And that means that I don't really have to worry about the tangency of the curve until I'm ready to deal with that. So this is just going to help me set up my timing. I'll go through it pretty quickly, and when I'm all done, I will go back, and at that point I will start doing the tweens. So maybe here I will take the ball, move it up. And the bad thing about auto keyframe is it doesn't always keyframe everything you need, so periodically you'll see me going back and setting a keyframe on translate Y, just making sure that that's a step tangent too. So there we go. Then we'll come over a few more frames, maybe frame 20. We'll move this over here, back down to 0, and we'll give that a rotation so it's facing the next jump. Then we'll move that over there, rotate it a little bit more. Maybe at frame 24, we'll move it over to the next jump, pick it up, make sure we're using step tangents, and again a few more frames over, hit the ground, make sure that's nice and even right at 0, rotate a little bit, come over a few frames. This jump is a little bit further away, so maybe we'll just move that over there, key translate Y, you know, I don't like these being at frame 29. Let's move that over to frame, let's do 32. Okay. Because right now I just kind of want to keep everything even. So frame 36, we'll move over here, rotate a little bit, pull that up, and then here at frame 40, we'll be all done with this first series of jumps, and we'll be just about ready to move into the next obstacle. So at this point, if I take a look at my curves, somebody didn't step. Let's make sure you're all stepped. There we go. So at this point, if I take a look at my curves, I'm definitely using Translate X. I'm definitely using Translate Y. Definitely using Translate Z. There's a Rotate X, and I'm not sure that I'm actually using Rotate X. I think I just messed up somewhere, and there's probably a very small value that I just want to get rid of. So we are not going to use this Translate X graph. I will delete it. Zeroed out, that's good. Rotate Y I am definitely using. Let's make sure that it is stepped. Rotate Z, again, I think I just have some small values that I should have gotten rid of earlier. So we will get rid of the Rotate Z graph. And now I know exactly what curves I'm using, and I know that I don't have any extra little bits that are going to mess me up later. So I'm feeling much better about that, and I can go through, I can look at all of my graphs, and if I play this back, it's going to look really weird, but it'll let me test my timing. So if that's moving too fast, what I can do is I can come through and I can start taking these keyframes. I can say these are happening at 40. Maybe I want them to happen at 48. That'll put more distance between them, so now these actions will go a little bit slower. You can also do this as a big chunk, so if I want all of these to be slower, I can take them here, and let's say instead of happening here, I want this to happen here. Again, I'm in my Move tool, I'm just going to Shift middle mouse drag. That'll move these keyframes over. And I can spread them all out the same way. I can use the Control key to deselect those keyframes, move this over here, so on and so forth until I'm all done. So now the animation will play through more slowly. And that might be better timing. So maybe I will slow down these last few keyframes as well. And now I will have a nice leisurely series of jumps. I'm not going to put any time restriction on this project. I would say that you want to do this with a minimum of 120 frames, but otherwise it's going to be fine. So I'm going to keep my timing as is. I will continue and just block out the rest of it. So maybe I will come to frame 76, and at this point I will move the ball over here. So it's entering its little slalom bit. I can probably go through that pretty quick. It's just got to run. So we'll move it maybe over here. And make sure that these are stepped, because they seem to be not stepped. There we go. Maybe at frame 92, we will get the rest of the way through here. And then I think by frame 96, we will be all ready to start this jumping. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I've got a translate Y keyframe set there, and that we are still using step tangents. And then by frame 100, we're going to come over here, and I'm going to pull this up. This block is exactly 2 units tall, so I can type in a 2, and that will move me up onto the block. Maybe we'll rotate a little bit that way. Then by 112, we'll hit here. Again, I'm going to be sure that I have keyed my translate Y. I want a translate Y keyframe each time the ball hits one of these blocks. So even though I'm not making any changes to translate Y, zero those out, I want to be sure that I've got a keyframe here. And let's frame my graph again. Make sure that we are still stepping. And then we'll come through, move this over here. This will come up to 4. And we'll rotate that a little bit. When I did my dry run of this, my tangents just stayed stepped, so I'm not really sure why we're not stepping, but we'll figure that out later. So by 136, we'll take the ball. Ooh, let's come back here and just make sure I've got that translate Y keyed. I do. So I'll come over to 136. And at 136, move the ball over here, rotate, set that translate Y key. 144. Move the ball up here. Let's see, that is, no, that's 7 units. That's a really big jump. There we go, 7 units. Take this, rotate it. I think it's hitting a little too far forward, so we'll move that back. Rotate as needed. And then 152. We'll pull this over here, back down to 4 units. Rotate just a little bit further. Let's make sure all of my tangents are stepped. Pull this forwards, down to 2 units. Give it a little bit of rotation, and then by 172, come over here, back down to 0 units. Move that back a little ways. And by 180, we'll just have the ball come back around. So we can start the obstacle course all over again because it's so excited about obstacles. One last translate Y key. So at this point, I've got all of my keyframes. They should all be step tangents. And the ball will just magically appear to go from place to place. So I'll zoom out a little bit, and this will let me check the timing of my animation. Whenever you're happy with what you're seeing, and I think this looks pretty good, I'm good with it here. Take a minute, massage your timing. Whenever you're happy, move on to the next video. In the next video, I will be taking this graph and tweening it so that we can get some of those motions to be a little bit smoother. And we can make sure that that translate Y graph is actually jumping instead of just floating. See you soon.